Well, thank you, Becky, for meeting with me.
It's my pleasure.
And as part of the Marathon County School-Based Counseling Consortium, I am going around and introducing myself and interviewing a few therapists within the community on some of our local trends and concerns within adolescent mental health. So Becky Pein is from Peaceful Solutions Counseling Agency, and I am Andy Grimm. I am the Coordinator of Pupil Services for the Wausau School District. And today we are going to talk about general anxiety. So again, thank you, Becky, for taking some time. More students are saying that they are anxious and have anxiety. Could you tell us a little bit more about that statement?
Yeah, so one of the really big things is that kids are learning a lot more about mental health than when I was in school. So kids are a lot more aware of this. But I think sometimes they get confused as to what anxiety really means. So one of the big things we look at with anxiety is there's apprehension, worry, stress, nervousness, distress. And so anxiety is really just kind of some of these things: apprehension, worry, stress, nervousness, uncertainty, fear. And it can typically be about an event that's going to happen or something that's coming up. A lot of it goes with like the unknown. Mm-hmm. Now, everybody has anxiety, and a little bit of anxiety is really good. It can help us perform better on a test. Mm-hmm. Be prepared for things, problem solve. But what happens is when it becomes too much, overwhelming, or it's constantly happening. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's going to start interfering in people's lives. So I think sometimes our kids hear about anxiety from their parents or other people, and then they're like, oh, I have this because I'm feeling a little nervous or worried. Mm-hmm. And again, that's okay.
Right. So just the awareness of anxiety within their home environment and peers is kind of creating that atmosphere where it's more acceptable to talk about it.
Yeah, which is great. It's exactly what we want.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
In your experience as a therapist, what are the main topics that cause anxiety within the students?
So if we're talking about like kind of generalized over a lot of period of time, it can be like friendships, with your little kids, like, will I have somebody to play with at recess? Am I going to do good on a test? Am I a good kid? Am I a bad kid? Will I have to answer a question? Will I embarrass myself, look stupid? Will my teacher hate me? And then you can get even into some more complex things. And this depends on like a wide variety of things, but am I going to be able to eat when I go home? Who's going to be home when I go home? Are mom and dad going to fight? Am I going to go home and get yelled at for something? Mm-hmm. So it's such a big question because there's so much, but really a lot of that social aspect, and really a lot of fear of being like judged, mm-hmm. And evaluated by other people or looking dumb or silly.
Yeah. So I hear you're saying a lot of internalizing thoughts that kind of go along with like the errors of thinking, am I going to be in trouble? What do my peers think? So some almost irrational thoughts in relation to reality.
Definitely. Now you will have some people that do act out when they get really uncomfortable, frustrated, confused, really worried. It can also kind of present as anger. So having some of these like outbursts, yelling at people, definitely worked with a young preteen and, lots of questions. Yes. What's going to happen next? Where are we going? Can I do this? Mm-hmm. Why haven't you answered me yet? I need to know. And it's that urgency and that, a lot of that. So would even then get in fights or yell like, I'm going to be late. Why aren't you ready?
Right.
So it definitely can be both.
Yes. So I know we're going to talk about signs and symptoms, but I'll be interested to hear about that transfer of what anxiety would look like in a different behavior.
Yes.
So cool. Thank you. What are some signs and symptoms related to anxiety that may cause issues in a student's life?
Okay, so again, when we have a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of apprehension, worry, that can be good. But when it even starts to intensify because of how anxiety works, like the mechanisms, which you've heard me talk about before, and I'm not going to get into in detail now, but we basically want to run away or we're going to fight. Yeah. And so one of the big things is you can see people that'll move a lot, or they'll almost feel like tingly, or because they want to run away or fight, escape this danger that isn't really danger. Yes. Sometimes people have a really hard time paying attention, especially if they're paying attention to their thoughts, these racing thoughts. Along with like the movement, there will be other things happening in your body. So you can get a lot of physical symptoms with anxiety: headaches, stomach aches, sweating, dizziness, nausea, increased heart rate, hyperventilating and breathing. So there's a lot of physical symptoms that people can also recognize. Like I said, a lot of asking questions, difficulty transitioning, sometimes just really breaking down when they feel overwhelmed, not being able to identify what's going on. But kind of like some of those irrational, overwhelming fears that the other thing is, no matter how much you kind of try to calm them down sometimes, it won't go away. Or that, again, that like, what if I have to answer a question in class? What if my friends don't like me? What if I don't have any friends? What if this happens? What if? Right. That's another really big thing. Struggles with sleep. So, I mean, even as adults, think about like we lay down and go to sleep and our brains just tend to explode. You can feel keyed up and on edge. The other thing that you can definitely see in children and adolescents sometimes is irritability. I think sometimes our kids can get really frustrated or angry or irritable when they can't make something work, or they don't know what's going to happen. And so that can kind of present as some of those outburst behaviors. So getting into physical fights sometimes, pushing, hiding, running away. We have students running out of classrooms, hiding in the bathroom. Sometimes some of the best things can be really, really little that can help them. But sometimes you will also hear people like talk about and say, oh, I feel nervous, I feel overwhelmed, my thoughts are racing. I can't, and then again, one of the big ones, I can't control the worries. And they are excessive. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting how you describe anxiety and how it adapts into other functions of behavior. So you have individuals that might be anxious, but they're going to crawl under the desk and pretend to sleep and close their eyes. Right. You have other individuals that are anxious and are going to be aggressive, or they're going to argue with a parent, they're going to run out of the building. So how can we as adults try to recognize what is anxiety versus another adolescent behavior, and then help support that level of anxiety?
So, Andy, that is the $1 million question right there. I think one of the first things, especially from my experience as a mental health therapist and working with kids and adolescents, is we can't always just assume. So one of the things, we've learned a lot about trauma, ADHD, and anxiety, and sometimes a kid having difficulty concentrating in class isn't ADHD, isn't anxiety, could be trauma. So it's asking kind of sometimes, what is the function of this behavior? Because all behaviors serve a purpose. And when we're talking about kids, it's not typically a manipulation for manipulation. It's to get a need met. even a selfish need. And that's, that's okay. But one of the big things is to listen. And the other huge thing that goes along with that is validating the feeling. Even if it seems silly or irrational or makes no sense, wow, I'm really sorry you feel that way. That must really be difficult. Because a lot of the times what I hear is people invalidate my feelings. So, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, it's silly to be worried about that. You're a great student. And it's kind of like a backhanded thing. Like, yeah, I'm a great student, but you shouldn't be worried, and, there's something wrong with you. So definitely listen and validate the feelings. Yeah. The other thing that's really interesting is, kids are really, really smart and intuitive, and then they'll play off of you and your energy. So one of the things we see, is like if a kid comes in with energy and anxiety like this, and then the parent is up here, the kid matches, and then you can just fight. But if your kid's up here and you come in and you're really calm, even if you're freaking out inside, as long as you try to stay, calm, use a calmer tone of voice. Okay, what's going on? What do you need? And when you ask, what do you need? Sometimes they'll be like, I don't know.
Right.
So other things can be, don't punish them for this type of behavior. Actually be really flexible and recognize that you might see some behavior changes in times of really high stress. Yeah. So we're talking high school students, finals, or dances coming up, or stress in the home, moving, people are sick. We've got to be flexible and then recognize that there may be more anxiety based on some of that stress, and kind of accommodating it a little bit. Yeah. Trying to have some predictability. So routine, that can be that's great. That's great for kids. Going back, it's the managing your expectations with the flexibility. Yeah. The other really big thing is when you try to suppress a thought, it actually makes it stronger. So things like, oh, just forget about it. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. That's silly to worry about. Those things aren't helpful. So kind of talking to them about their worry. One of the big things that anxiety is good is, can it be used for problem solving? So if I'm worried about getting in a car accident in the winter in the snow, okay, do I have numbers that I would call if this happened? Who would I call to help me? Do I have, water, those kind of things in my car? So if it's used to prepare, it's good. Right. Because when anxiety is bad is when you just keep having the anxiety. So one of my favorite things is anxiety is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, something to think about.
Yeah. I think one of the other really big things is don't treat yourself, if you have anxiety, or your child like they're fragile. So we don't want to accommodate too much, because you have to function and live in this world. You can't just shut down when you become overwhelmed or anxious. So, encouragement really helps. Praise, having them stop and take a breath. Let's take a minute. Let's take a break. Again, not going to get into the science behind it, but I will say it over and over again. Deep breathing is the first thing to do with stuff like this.
Yes.
And it's not going to work like that. We got to do it a little bit at a time. Yeah. Encouraging them. Use your skills. You can do this. Another really, really big thing is let them fail.
That is a challenge for some adults.
Yeah.
To let students or their children fail.
Yes. And it doesn't make you a bad person, because in my mind, failure isn't a bad thing. And yes, I struggle with that too. Like, I don't want to fail. But failure is just an opportunity for us to learn.
Yes.
Because if we don't fail, we don't learn. If we don't learn, we don't grow. If we don't grow and change, are we really living?
Right.
So it's the opportunity to fail gives us the opportunity to learn from that. And again, yeah, like failure isn't a bad thing.
Right.
Let kids make mistakes. It's okay. How do we fix this mistake?
Right.
Because that, again, when you see that with perfectionism, and that sometimes comes with anxiety, and like it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
Just do your best.
Right. Well, that's a great answer as well. So some of the things I picked out, one is don't be afraid to have those challenging conversations with your kids.
Right.
Be very open. Validate what they're feeling because it may not be related to what you feel, but kind of remember where they're developmentally at.
Yes.
And it's going to be different.
Yeah.
And I love that last statement about change. Like, we're going to make mistakes. We're people.
Yeah.
But accept that change. Know you're not a bad person.
Right.
And then find a solution so that it doesn't happen again.
Exactly.
And that's what living is going to be.
Right.
So, again, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
And as part of the Marathon School-Based Counseling Consortium, we have therapists in every school district in Marathon County, which is amazing in itself. But just my final note would be if a parent has concerns about their child developing like chronic anxiety or to the point where a therapist would be needed, just a reminder for parents that they can either go through their school social worker or school counselor or contact one of our many agencies within Marathon County and they could reach somebody at Peaceful Solutions.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.